Hello comic fans, here's Earl Grey with the last part of my listing extravaganza about my favorite comic publishers, writers, artists. Highly subjective, of course, it's just my point of view, but I want to stop apologizing because it's clear, I think, that these lists are just made for the fun of making them and not made to be taken too seriously. Today we're in the top 15 of of my favorite cartoonists who write their own stuff. Maybe you can call them auteur artists. Starting with 15, we have Alex Raymond, and this is the German edition of Rip Kirby, Volume 6. Wonderful reproductions. I think the German edition here is even a bit better reproduction-wise than the English one, and that was the reason why I bought it. Bit bigger and so on. And you can see Rip Kirby is just a detective who has always the nicest chicks at hand and smokes the coolest pipe and drives the coolest cars, which is a bit ironic given that he died in a car accident. Here's another thing, one of the crown jewels in my collection. Flash Gordon and Jungle Jim, the original facsimilized, of course, Sunday pages here. There's a reason why Alex Raymond was copied again and again. He has just this lush, wonderful art style. Story-wise, it lacks a lot. In fact, when you compare Jungle Jim, with a hero in the jungle, and Flash Gordon, who is really somewhere else in time and place, but the stories here very often use the same tropes. When he escapes, Flash Gordon escapes as well, and so you can see really that the storytelling department was not so important to Alex Raymond, or just not his strength, but the art is just gorgeous and wonderful. The fourth book here is totally out of print or not to get anymore, nowhere, unfortunately. So that was my rank 15, and now to the stuff that I have here in front of me. Now I have to cheat because I totally forgot about Lorenzo Mattotti, and that's a shame. And so I had to squeeze him in here on rank 14 together with Kosei. But first about Lorenzo Mattotti. He's great in black and white with this highly sensitive, emotional story of the man at the window. When you look at these pages, you may think that that's not really much ink on the page. Here, more. But the story is brilliant and one of my favorite comics of all time. Actually a bit the same in terms of using ink lines and black and white only, is Galandia. This is published by Fantagraphics, so it should be available for you as well. Fantasy saga about these nice creatures and very idiosyncratic storytelling, like it's always the case, I would say, with Lorenzo Mattotti, but it's every time different, especially when you can see here his pastel chalk style that he uses in Fire. This is quite typical for a lot of Lorenzo Mattotti's books. And he doesn't always write his own stories like it is with this book here. And in fact, The Man at the Window was written by one Mrs. Ambrosi, one of my long-time, all-time favorites is the Swiss Cosy, and this here is of a series called Jonathan. This is Jonathan, and yeah, this is a romance comic, believe it or not. And you really have already butterflies in your belly when you look at these letters here. Jonathan is a really nice series, and for a long time I hope that they will reprint all the Jonathan stories in nice album hardcovers or something. But there's enough cozy to discover. Nevertheless, like here, the Search for Peter Pan. This is available in the meantime in a black and white edition as well, even though I would prefer the colored version, like you can see here. And actually, I bought the black and white version from a French publisher, which is, the black and white book is a bit bigger than the German one, and I just want to compare my colored version here with the French or with the black and white version. So, and Orchidea, a road movie trip, pretty short story, but quite epic in scale, and we would see these siblings driving through America to visit their dad, and he has some surprise for them, and it's a really charming, wonderful road trip movie in comic form. And you see already there my rank 13, which is Guido Crepax. And just have this one book here. But of course, when you have the complete Crepax finally by Fantagraphics Books one day, yeah, then you have the complete Crepax. And this Italian here never ceases to amaze me with his art style, panel layouts, and dreamy and erotic storytelling, and yeah, one of the artists. I really want to make a panellogy about him for a long time, but it's a bit difficult because his strength is obviously drawing, yeah, nude woman and sex scenes and whatnot. And I'm not into BDSM, as I always say. Beware, but it's still nice art and nice cartooning, and it's a bit difficult to do some review about this or talk about it, and just always put your hand on certain parts of the art. It's art, for God's sake. However, and now to rank 12, and that's Daniel Klaus. Ghost World. I think I've seen the movie one day, but actually can't remember too much of it. But I thought, hey, yeah, that's a good enough representation of the comic. You see here, not many pages actually, but with Daniel Klaus, it's sometimes, yeah, you really have the emotion or the feeling, the impression to have witnessed a whole epic, even if the book was not that big, as it is with David Boring, one of my sleeper hits in terms of Daniel Klaus. Really not a boring story. around this character, who is a bit aptly called David Waring, and beautiful. These were the German editions, but of course you can get all the stuff via Fantagraphics. This one here is from Daniel, drawn at Quarterly, the Death Ray, very oversized thing here. And come on, I don't have to tell you about Daniel Close. You had to have lived under a rock if you don't know anything about him. Which is true actually for all the rest of the video, which I do nevertheless. And I want to talk a bit about Robert Crumb. Yeah, you know what a big fan of his sketchbooks I am. Here are some other examples of his output. Yum Yum. It's a nice little fable that he drew back in the day for his first wife, Dana. And this is the German edition or collection of some of his comics of the end times. And yeah, Robert Crumb is many things. He's and one of these is that he is really one of these apocalyptic guys. So quite fitting that he uses here some painting by Hieronymus Bosch as a template. And yeah, and of course all his roster of cute animals and sexy ladies, what he considers to be sexy, and critic on society, art experiments, and stories about historic events, about certain persons, jazz musicians, and so on. All the stuff is in there, and I actually don't know why the English, these are beautiful books, hardcovers and all, and I always found the complete Crumb comics by Fantagraphics not really appealing, how they're built as these kind of floppies. I mean, they're of course affordable, but this goes only for the ones that you still can get. But I digress. Just wanted to showcase you this here because it has Fritz the Cat on it. Another of Robert Crumb's very famous creations. Now to rank 10. And yeah, Mike Mignola, he is actually more a creator, maybe not even a writer, a designer of worlds. He definitely has stamped his style all over the Mignola-verse books, so that many other artists like Duncan Figueredo and so on can mimic in a very good way, and with mimic I don't mean this condescending or anything as bad. It's just a recognizable style, and each of these artists has its very own take on Mike Mignola's house style. This here, the Amazing Screw-On Head, is drawn by him, as it was obviously with volume 1 of Hellboy, these beautiful library editions with Seed of Destruction and Wake the Devil. Still the gold standard for book excellence, I think, how these Hellboy library editions are made. Yeah, Mike Mignola fully deserved his rank number 10. And now to a guy that really keeps me excited, especially this year, even though he's not with us anymore. But we have new editions of a lot of his stuff coming in this year and the following years, I think. And And this is the German edition of Dan about this, yeah, I don't know. It's just pure escapism in the most fun way in the future with his fantastic use of colors. Richard Corbin had carved his very own niche in the comic world. Especially I loved as a kid, for obvious reasons, this book here, New Stories Out of 1001 Night, and written by Jan Strat, however he's pronounced. So yeah, I'm showing here a bit this book here against my own rule, but I think Richard Corbin did enough of his own juice about every kind of story. He is just a Richard Corbin story written by Jan Strat or not is always very much a Richard Corbin story, if you get what I mean. So, and here we have one of his later creations, Shadows on the Grave, a couple of horror stories with lots of these EC vibes, even though you can still see just one panel and know that you're in Corbin territory. Highly recommended, like everything Corbin did. Just a hell of an artist and creator. Combining pulpy feel with pretty intelligent storytelling. And now to something completely different, rank 8, Karl Barks. Maybe he is the artist with whom I experienced back in the day for the first time the feeling what a different draughtsman can mean for a character, because as a kid I loved, and I still love, of course, until this day, the way Karl Barks draws his ducks, and especially Donald. He's just a bundle of emotions, and nothing was as fun to me as when he really gets angry and he's so vivid and cool and emotional, and you just have to love that little duck guy here. And plus, there are just great stories out there, and he invented a Scrooge. In German, he's called Uncle Dagobert. Yeah. And with Uncle Scrooge, they are experiencing these crazy adventures, like with this story here, in which these spheric guys that live down there in the earth, they create earthquakes, and unfortunately, directly under the big money building with the money, the Geldspeicher in German, of Uncle Scrooge. And that's not really something that you would like when you have all your milliards and trilliards and zilliards of billions and billions of money there. Now to rank 7, and these are actually two persons, Jean Giraud and Möbius. Now it's obviously the same person, but in two different versions. When he draws Western, he was called himself Jean Giraud. And here we see a little homage by Maurice to Giraud, and on the other hand, homage to Lucky Luke by Giraud. Which is a nice pairing here, but here we have the real deal, the Blueberry stories. Dense storytelling, fantastic westerns. I mean, Blueberry was in the beginning modeled after Jean-Paul Belmondo, which you can see on almost each panel, because they hoped that it would be adapted into a movie, which never came into being, at least not with Jean-Paul Belmondo, and so the appearance of Blueberry changed after a while. Like it is very often with Möbius drawings, like in the Inca, Jean Defool, the main character, his appearance changes drastically over the run of the story, and with some intention, because he has his heroic moments. He's a goofball most of the time, and then he looks a bit like a goofball with a longish snout, and but when he has his heroic moments, he looks almost like an ideal man, beautiful. And we have here inside Möbius his autobiographic musings about his cartooning and his life. There we have him, and all the other characters like Arzak and Blueberry. Now to 6, and on 6, maybe you wonder what can be even better than Möbius, and I have to admit that Möbius could be higher in my list, and maybe it should, but anyhow, now it's this way here. Hugo Pratt, of course, first and foremost, he is here in this top 15 because of Corto Maltese, which is just a fantastic series, and about this captain without a ship, dreamy, romantic, and poetic, exotic, and nicely drawn. It's almost, and sometimes his use of black and white is almost like music on paper. The Celts wasn't available anymore in this black and white edition here, so I looked for some replacement, substitute, and so I got this book here. But as you can see, it's Corto Maltese as well. Crazy characters and just a fun story. And fun is certainly not the right word for this tour de force. Ernie Pike, about a war journalist, these are more or less short stories taken place in the Second World War, and having a real background, and which makes them even more impactful. I have to admit that I'm still not over with this book here, because it is so heartbreaking, and stuff like this, you don't read it for fun, but it's just necessary to deal with this kind of stuff. Okay, back to something more enjoyable in a good way. Charles Burns, even though he has his dark sides, especially when you think of Black Hole. Rank number 5. I haven't picked up Black Hole because I think this goes without saying that Black Hole is one of the greatest comics of all time. I think the English comic community still waits for an English version of Data Loss, which is just crazy. We have already the second volume of this book. This is still volume 1. You see here, this is some unusual use of colors that you can witness here. It's a bit story-wise Black Hole related. Different characters, but the tropes and the threads he's spinning there are pretty familiar to you when you have read Black Hole, which doesn't mean that I don't like it. Absolutely not. And here's his Tintin homage, and here you can see obviously that there's some Tintinization of this main character going on. This is just the goofiest read that you can imagine until you read the next Charles Burns story. Maybe you go into his past with El Borba, and I love his old black and white comics here. They're just gorgeous. I did videos about all the stuff by Charles Burns that I own, so actually we can continue with another guy that I panelogized thoroughly, I think. Philippe Drouillet, rank 4. Nosferatu, his take on vampires. I think never was a vampire as worthy as our Nosferatu guy here in this story. And we come to learn and sympathize with him and all his struggles with the rubber doll that he loves and all other wacky shit. As I always say, for different reasons, La Nuit, the Night, is maybe my favorite because it's his memoir for his wife. The story is absolutely not about her death, but you can feel the grief, the anger about the universe who allows death. And yeah, it's really heartbreaking, the whole story here. And more objectively, maybe my recommendation would be to start your experience with Philippe Drouillet with the 6 Voyages of Lone Sloan. All these books are published through Titan Books, so you can get these. This is the German edition here, of course, but the Titan version is very similar. A lot cheaper, I have to say. The paper is a bit thinner and the format just a tiny bit smaller, but you get the real package nevertheless. So, but with Philippe Drouillet, I didn't want to save money, and I wanted to have the German translation here. On 3 we have Hermann Hüppen. And this is the Tower of Bois-Maury series, around about 15 albums or so, set in medieval times. And like everything Hermann does, it's very real. He doesn't embellish anything. His characters are not more beautiful than normal human beings, and despite maybe you can say that his characters look a bit cartoony in some way, not really photorealistic, but they are well fleshed out, rounded characters, and that's the benefit of this longer-lasting series. Hermann did short album-length stories as well, and they have their strength as well in being very brutal and killing off almost every character in the story. Look for these sceneries, and there's so much beauty to discover amongst all these poor sceneries, poor and harsh sceneries. It was a hard life in these times, and you can feel it. With Hermann, I really stretch my rules here again a bit. Maybe the most the series for which he is most famous for is called Comanche, a Wild Western tale that was written by a guy named Greg. Same with this one here. This is one album-length story written by Jean Van Am. I could have put Hermann in the other category as well, but For me, he is such an outstanding artist, such an outstanding creator, that he just needs the inspiration of the writer to do his very own thing with it. I know this is some cheap excuse to have here my category going, but yeah, as you can imagine by the few glimpses here, harsh, brutal, really noir, dark tale. And there's Jeremiah, his longest lasting series for sure, a post-apocalyptic saga about this guy and his friend, and changing roster of characters trying to survive in a future which is a bit like Wild Western days, but with motorbikes that some cars and some of the technic stuff has survived the apocalypse, and so it is a bit Wild Western with a modern slash maybe sci-fi flavor. Some of you would maybe say Mad Max. I still have to see Mad Max. Can you believe it? However, now to rank 1. Yes, I skip rank 2 because, yeah, I couldn't decide for the life of me who I should give the golden tea bag of excellence in this category here. Monsieur Jacques Tardy or the other guy. Maybe you can guess already who the other guy is. But first to Jacques Tardy, and this is The Demon in the Eyes, and a goofy adventure done in the style of the 19th century. As you can see here, it mimics pretty successfully this kind of graphics, and has some crossoverings to the other fantastic series, or one of these many fantastic series by Jacques Tardy, Adèle Blanc-Sec, which is available through Fantagraphics. I guess a lot of Jacques Tardy stuff is available in the meantime through Fantagraphics. With this particular book, I'm not so sure, but many of his crime books, like Killers Don't Introduce Themselves, or however it is translated, this title, is available through Fantagraphics. His crime noir stories are excellent, even though I'm breaking there my own rules, because these crime stories are either adaptations or they are plainly written by this guy Manchette, and he has other comics that are comic adaptations, but somehow I feel he is the most important factor in crafting these stories. Of course, there are these scripts that he uses, but for the most part, a Jacques Tardy comic is a Jacques Tardy comic, and not a comic that was written to him by other guys here. And this here is truly Jacques Tardy, as it is with The War of the Trenches. You can get these books about the First World War through Fantagraphics, War of the Trenches, and there's a second one, I don't remember the English title. I read these books recently, and man, this is intense reading, and the most intense reading that I ever had, comics or not. It's not possible to go through this book here without tears in your eyes, without experiencing the anger, and you really want to scream into the universe, humanity, what's wrong with you? And a terrible story, fantastically told. So, I had to take a breath. The second guy here who wins my golden tea bag of excellence is obviously nobody else but Jaime Hernandez. For me, he's the one of the Los Bros Hernandez. Obviously, they're a fantastic couple of comic creators, but Jaime Hernandez is for me where Love and Rockets is at. Since I've read The Death of Speedy way back then, when did this book here came out? In 1991. So some years have passed, but my love for Love and Rockets has only increased since then, and you can really cherish and appreciate these stories here even more when you have all the stories after these. We still have Maggie, we still have Ray, of course, but we have new characters like Tonta, and even some whacked out side stories with superheroic action there. Of course, very female-centric, because Jaime Hernandez just likes to draw women, and I can really understand this. But that's, I mean, Love and Rockets, what should I tell you? Watch my other videos about Love and Rockets, and I think this video and the whole series of listing stuff here is long enough for now. Thanks, and thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.